Next up is Riaz Capital, and presenting for Riaz is Garrick Monahan. So I'm bringing Garrick Monahan up on stage now. Here you come.
Can you see me?
Yes, and you're not Garrick. This is Riaz Taplin himself. And as you can see, Riaz is going to be presenting Ozone Fund 3. They do workforce housing in the Oakland, California area.
Cool.
Riaz, happy to have you here with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Jimmy. So here we go. I'm not used to doing this in 15 minutes, but I'm going to do my best job. I'm going to get into my background and the firm's background and the body of the presentation. And here we go. So I'm talking to you all from this very colorful building here, Art House Studios. This is our only commercial project, but Riaz Capital is a Bay Area-based development and asset management company focused on workforce housing. The fund that we're currently raising for is $100 million. We've raised 75 million of that so far. The fund is targeting a net equity multiple of 3.2x, a 15% IRR, and 11% cash on cash. This fund is a portfolio development strategy. We have 3 deployment models: micro living communities, adaptive reuse, and multifamily repositioning. This fund is, as I mentioned, a portfolio development strategy. This is done to avoid a single point of failure. Over the last 20 years that I've built my current portfolio of 1,500 units, I've always focused on avoiding a single point of failure by having a reasonable number of small to medium-sized buildings to ensure performance. Who is Riaz Capital? Riaz Capital is a 30-person firm of real estate professionals. We are a vertically managed firm. In other words, we have teams allocated to managing acquisitions, entitlement, construction, property management. We do not necessarily perform all of those activities internally, but we have internal expertise across the entire development cycle. We are currently $500 million in real estate assets under management. We have 3,000 units between our operating portfolio and our development portfolio prior to Fund 3. We currently have 38 operating buildings, and we've averaged a 36% weighted IRR on our exited deals over the course of the last decade. What do? We've developed a strategy called micro living, which more simply put is simply the idea of how do you build entry-level housing that is cool and fun for the people living it to live in, right? Over the 20 years that I've been in the workforce housing business, I've done luxury housing, mass market housing, micro studios, student housing, and co-living. We've now brought this all together into the strategy we call micro living. And the basic idea is I wanted to develop a strategy for entry-level housing where I'd be cool if my sister was living in it, if my girlfriend was living in it. In other words, that just because you don't have a big budget doesn't mean you shouldn't have a nice place to live. This portfolio development experience, we built, give or take 100-unit buildings, micro living communities, converted churches into apartments, and rehabilitated suburban complexes over the course of the last decade. Our investment thesis has 5 key components: to be cycle resistant, to have a strong resident experience, to be an efficient builder, to produce strong cash flow for our investors, and to be a socially responsible actor in our community, which is why we're very focused on the impact that we create. I'm not going to go through every slide, but we will send the presentation out afterwards. Who is our customer? Who will be living in these buildings? Our average customer is 32 years old, makes $61,000, but almost has a 700 credit score. Over the course of COVID, that means that our portfolio was able to produce 95% average occupancy and a 94% collection rate. I'm going to dump down here. If you imagine who will be living in this building as a demographic as opposed to an individual, we're really focused on single income professionals, that period in life between 22 and 32, which has been created over the course of the last few decades. It also is ideal for student housing because we have so many colleges here in the Bay Area, and for couples. It's not designed specifically for families and seniors. Resident experience. I came from a design background, and I wanted to make sure that just because someone didn't have a large budget, they had a cool place to live. So we're very focused on the combination of how the space feels and the functional design. Over the course of the decade, we've developed studios and micro studios. And we focus on there being 6 functional areas in addition to the way the space feels: a place to sleep, a place to put away your stuff, etc. So that the function of the space is as important in the way it looks. This is a blow up of the studio. This is a blow up of a of a junior 1-bedroom. This is another junior 1-bedroom. This is a dual resident unit type. But in other words, we've developed a series of what I call Legos that we put together on each individual project to create the ideal mix for that location and that project size. We then pair that with a transit-oriented location, a vibrant neighborhood, and the specific amenities in the building to offset the space that you don't have in your unit and or what's available in the neighborhood. So why should someone invest in this? Fundamentally, what we've done is we've created an entitlement strategy, an efficient building, and affordability matrix that comes together to create a strong investor return underneath an opportunity zone umbrella. And what does that mean in core numbers? We have a proven track record of building at $250K per residence in a market where it costs $600. We've proven that we can do it in 30 months in a market where it typically takes 72 months, and we've proven we can do it at a higher yield. If you look at one page in our presentation afterwards, it's these 3 metric comparisons, which is our competitive advantage as a firm. How do we do this? Number one, we look to state legislation. The California state density bonus has created a once in a lifetime opportunity to basically scale housing. We've made ourselves experts in this legislation. Number 2, we standardize everything. I don't want you to think about our units like little cogs in a wheel, but in order to make anything efficient and cost effective, you have to standardize it. Number 2, we think about this as an assembly line approach to building housing. Getting a site acquired, getting it entitled, building it and stabilizing it, where we can do it in a 30-month cycle to have better velocity of capital. We're here in the Bay Area, but the reality is technology is going to change the way we work and the way we live. We're very focused on adding a technology layer on top of our buildings. And because we're a new construction strategy, we can link together the leads, the leases, the access controls, and other technology elements in the building into a single layer to create operating efficiency and a better customer experience. You know, I came from a small business background. You know, I grew up in a real estate family. I'm a 2nd-generation real estate owner. And what my dad taught me was, at the end of the day, what really matters is what's the cash flow you're getting off your assets. So in the first 3 years, we're building buildings, so there's no cash flow. After that, we're trying to produce basically an 11% cash on cash return on your equity invested before the tax benefits. For those of us, you know, that care about the impact that what we do in our portfolios has on our community, we've been very focused on having very good transit scores relative to the national average, very good housing affordability scores, and also fundamentally being a green solution by building less and using eco materials. If you think about the returns that we're going to produce, it's a 15% net IRR, and the opportunity zone benefits, because of the way we've structured it, adds about 600 basis points to the return. So your tax adjusted number is something like a 21%. In this fund, we're not trying to necessarily just maximize IRR. We're trying to maximize your tax adjusted equity multiple over the course of the decade. Our team. Team is the most important thing in business, right? I'm very fortunate over the course of the 20 years that I've now been running this business to have brought on 3 amazing partners, Max, Seth, and Paul, as well as 2 other key team members, Ariel and Lisa. Lisa's entitled 3,000 units in the course of her career and has come to us and heads up entitlement. Paul heads up our finance function. Ariel runs human resources, Seth runs development, and Max runs operations. We have a proven track record of working together as a team, right? This basically prevents any risk around any one team member. We also have a great group of advisors. So how does the terms on our vehicle work? We have a minimum commitment of $250,000. The general partnership is putting in $2 million. And we're an 8% annually compounded preferred return with 75% of all distributions going to investors. We have a 1.5% blended fee on contributed capital.
Okay, good. Well, if anybody has any questions for Riaz, please do use the Q&A and the little Q&A icon in your Zoom toolbar. We got time for a few questions here. Morgan asks, he thought that he saw a slide that said OZ Fund 3. Does that mean that there were 2 prior OZ funds? And maybe you can talk a little bit about those. How big were they, and how are those projects going so far? That's a great question.
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
So, we've, as one of the prior presenters said, we've been working in the same areas and the same strategy prior to the opportunity zone being created. So in reality, we've had a total of 5 funds. We've had 2 reposition funds. We've also had 3 development funds, one of which was not an opportunity zone fund, which we call Fund 1. Fund 2 was an opportunity zone fund, which is now fully allocated, and we're now raising Fund 3. In sum, we've raised about $200 million for our strategy over the course of the last 4 years. This fund, Fund 2, which was also an opportunity zone vehicle, was about a $93 million vehicle. So this fund is not intended to be any larger, is not materially different from the scale we were already working at.
Good answer there. Let's get to some basic details now. Somebody wanted to know what's the minimum, what is the minimum investment, and where can we go to find the subscription documents?
That's a great question. So let me scroll down to our little summary of terms here. Our minimum investment commitment is $250,000. Is $250,000. In terms of getting access to subscription docs, etc., you just want to email me at riaz@riazcapital.com or go to our website, www.riazcapital.com. I'm dating myself by adding the www, because I think it works equally well when you go to riazcapital.com.
All right, that sounds good. So riaz@riazcapital.com for offering documents. I just put that in the chat right now as well, so you can copy and paste Riaz's email address and make sure he knows that you're interested. A couple more questions here. We got a few more minutes, it looks like, so good amount of time here. Mike has a long question here, so let me see if I can read all this. Hello, Riaz, he starts. Recently, Riaz Capital hosted a walkthrough of some of your units for those in the Bay Area. I'd emailed Garrick in hopes that you could record a video or VR tour. Are you able to do that? For those of us not in the Bay Area, having the opportunity to see the units from the perspective of someone on a walkthrough and get a feel for your product would make your investment more understandable and relatable. Do you have that ability? Do you have a walk-in available, or can you do that for Mike?
If you email me, I can send you some virtual tours to existing unit types. And if you after that, if you'd also like us to do a video recording of us walking through in a similar format, we're happy to do that as well.
Fantastic. So again, that's at riaz@riazcapital.com. Mike, there you can reach out to Riaz directly and he'll get that set up for you. Thanks, Riaz. Let's see. We got an anonymous question here. What are cash flow and refi distribution expectations?
That's a great question. So I would say this is a unique feature of our fund. What we're doing for the first 3 years, there are no distribution. The average cash on cash is an 11%, which includes all distributions prior to exit, right? In years 4 and year 5, and what's highlighted here in blue, you're getting pure operating distributions. In years 6 and 7, you're getting both operating and refinance distributions. We're planning, which is an important number, to return 53% of your capital invested by the end of year 6 to facilitate the tax payment that will be due in Q1 of 27. The part of the reason why the refinance distributions are not higher in any one year is that we're building a portfolio of assets. So if you invest, let's just say $1 million for the sake of the argument, you own 1% of the fund, which represents 16 different residences across, well, probably 10 different locations. So we're really trying to de-risk the strategy by not having our investors invest in any single project, which basically makes the cash flows more even over the course of the decade.
Gotcha. Okay, good. Let's see. Another anonymous question just came in. At some other events, this person has heard some fund managers say investors don't care about social impact, which seems to defeat the purpose and promise of the opportunity zone incentive, and not what we want to hear, and not what legislators who have the power to possibly extend this program want to hear either. It's really refreshing that really refreshing to hear you talk about that social impact that's at the core of what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit more about your social impact mission within this structure?
How long do I have?
I'll give you a couple minutes. How does that sound?
Okay, cool.
I know you could probably talk about it for an hour, right?
Yeah, longer. So, dear Anonymous, look, I grew up in what I call a do well, do good family. So my stepdad ran an organization called the Sierra Club. My mother ran a public interest PR firm, and my dad was a real estate developer. And my dream was, how do I bring these two concepts together into one single activity? So over the course of the last 20 years, I've been working at, like, how do we create something that's both good for investors and good for the audience we serve and the community we work in. As a company, we support, for example, in one of our existing buildings, Anonymous, we house first-year teachers in the Oakland school district, right? And when we start in the Oakland school district, we support Oakland Promise, which is a cradle to career education initiative in Oakland. You know, we focus on having timber-based buildings because there are 70% fewer emissions. We focus on a higher resident to square footage ratio in the building, because fundamentally building less is the key to green. We focus on locating near transit with high walk scores, bike scores. We really want to see, like, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, how do you build a series of communities that are sensitive to the communities that we're building them into, right? Most importantly, if you want to look at one number, it's the combination affordability index score, which merges your housing costs and your transport costs into a share of your income. And this fundamentally is bringing together the affordability nature of our strategy and the transit-oriented nature of our strategy into a nationally recognized score, right? So when we're analyzing the locations, we're looking at the look and the feel of the location, but we're also looking to how functional is that location in terms of access to jobs, access to urban services, access to entertainment, which is what fundamentally makes it a more affordable strategy.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Riaz. We got time for one more real quick question, and then I do have to bring our next presenter up on stage. Mike, by the way, is gunning for MVP, I think. He's asked several great questions throughout the course of the day. Mike, I really appreciate your attention and your participation. But Mike asks, Riaz, how much has been raised thus far into Fund 3?
So I just got back from a trip today. So this is a dated number, but we basically announced that we were raised $75 million of the $100 million total so far. We're probably closer to $80 million as of today.
Fantastic. So you're well on your way, it sounds like.
Riaz,
thanks again. Thanks for filling in for Garrick. I hope he feels better soon. And we'll catch you later. All right. Thanks, Riaz. Appreciate it.
Really appreciate you inviting me on, Jimmy. All the best, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.